Back to that sickening story from the US. It's one of those days you don't want your kids to hear the news. Of course, at least 19 children are dead after what is the third worst school massacre in US history, the worst school shooting in the history of Texas. Greg Shaffer served in the FBI for 20 years. He runs a security advisory specialising in the prevention of domestic terrorism and shooting crimes. He's the author of Stay Safe, Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World, outlining security and safety tools for everyday life in the US. He joined me earlier from Dallas, and I observed how the US must be reeling yet again.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, we are. I think the whole nation's in mourning. And whenever you have an incident like this that involves children, it crushes the soul and breaks the heart of everybody, particularly those with school-age children.
Yet nothing seems to be done about it.
Well, let's look at it this way. These active shooters, and I've studied these active shooters for a very long time. I've been studying violence for decades. These active shooters, for the most part, are cowards, and they will go to the least protected target. And unfortunately, in America, schools are those targets. I think this will bring to light the necessity that every school in America needs a trained, armed professional. Whether it is a law enforcement officer or just a trained professional, I think we need somebody in every school in America who has the capacity to take care of these kind of threats when they walk into the schools. And having an armed response there, I think, will help diminish these attacks on our schools. This individual chose the school for a reason. He knew, by doing just a little bit of surveillance, that there was not a school resource officer there.
Wouldn't the solution be to get these military-style weapons off the streets, to get the weapons off the public, off the criminals, to try and cut down on the amount of gun crime in the US?
Well, I hear that a lot, particularly from those from other countries. America obviously has the largest amount of gun ownership in the world. Last check, there were over 400 million guns in America. But, we have that Second Amendment, which guarantees the right of every citizen to own arms to protect themselves against a tyrannical government. It's not for hunting. The Second Amendment was to protect the citizens from a government that got out of hand. So you can't just do away with the Second Amendment. That's not going to happen. This gun genie is out of the bottle. So that will not be, nor can it ever be in America, that solution. Now, if you remember this also, sir, there were 1.5 million incidents of crimes being stopped just last year by armed citizens. And you look at the number of deaths caused by weapons, it's a small percentage of that 1.5 million.
This sounds to me like that you just give up, though, that you have this gun culture. We all know about the Second Amendment, and you just give up and say this is the future of the US. Now, mass shootings are not limited to the US. We've had them in Australia as well, but they're extremely rare in the rest of the world. It seems like in the US, we just get used to mass shootings, even at schools. 19 children in this latest assault. We had a mass killing of 10 people in Buffalo, New York earlier this month. I mean, surely you have to decide that the gun culture, the quantity of guns and the type of guns running rampant across the US society has to be curbed.
Well, sir, I disagree with you. I don't think it's a gun problem. It's a mental health problem. But evil exists. Evil has existed since the beginning of mankind, back in the caveman days. There will always be evil people who will find a way to kill people.
But this is exactly my point. This is exactly my point, Greg Shaffer. There are evil people and mental health problems in all other countries in the world and all the comparable Western democracies. The reason they don't have school shootings and regular gun massacres is because there are not as many guns.
That may be the case. But again, this is America, where that Second Amendment, and we are a gun culture, like you said it is. We have over 400 million weapons in the United States. You're not going to confiscate those. That's just that. I'm sorry, but that can't be part of the solution, not in this country, and especially now. I know a lot of foreign governments think that's the right solution, but that will never happen in America. Americans will never give up their weapons. So we have to come up with more innovative ideas. And one of those is placing better security in these soft targets. Schools are historically soft targets. We don't have these kind of problems at sporting events. You know, I live in Dallas, Texas. Dallas Cowboys, very famous football team. I'm sure you and your people out in Australia have heard of the Dallas Cowboys. Never an active shooter at the stadium because they have very good security. Why can't we take that same security and integrate it into our schools? There's no reason we can't. So we can't solve it, and taking away guns is not the answer.
I despair, Greg, that it gets to that. Certainly, if you had your children in a school in the US, you would want the tightest security because of this problem. But surely it's not a long-term problem. I heard about this on the radio this morning while I was dropping my kids to school, and the absolute horror, the disgust that people would go to schools and perpetrate such atrocities is beyond me. Why? Why is it schools that are targeted?
Because they're a soft target. Because most schools don't have a defensive mechanism in place. We're getting better. Some schools have what we call SROs, school resource officers. They are police officers from the local police force who stand in the schools all day and, you know, develop friendships with the students. So when they hear something, they tell that officer, and they can then start doing interviews and doing a threat assessment on that person that may be a potential threat to the schools. But we need to make sure those school resource officers are in every school in America. Grade school, middle school, junior high, high school. Every one of those institutions of education need to have an armed officer trained in those schools. I think that would have a great impact in diminishing these school shootings.
Greg, our sympathies are with the people of the United States, especially in those communities affected, but we despair at what seems to be a lack of action. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Have a great night.
It's just incomprehensible, isn't it? I'll speak to former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson about this gun issue and how Australia led the way in the wake of the Port Arthur massacre.